Here's something wild. In the 1600s, the wealthiest country in the world per capita wasn't Spain with its New World gold, wasn't England with its growing empire, wasn't France with its massive population. It was the Netherlands, a tiny country smaller than West Virginia, with a population of only 2 million people. And they got rich not by conquering land or mining gold, but by trading, innovating, and literally inventing modern capitalism. The Dutch created the first modern stock market, the first multinational corporation, the first central bank, and some of the first government bonds. They built ships that could carry more cargo more efficiently than anyone else. They traded everywhere, from Japan to Manhattan to South Africa to Indonesia. At one point, the Dutch had over 15,000 merchant ships, more than the rest of Europe combined, and they used their wealth to create an explosion of art and culture. Rembrandt, Vermeer, Frans Hals, the Dutch Golden Age produced some of the greatest art in Western history. So how does a tiny, swampy country with no natural resources become the richest place on earth? How do you invent capitalism? And what happens when military power matters more than merchant power? I'm Jack, this is Blueprints of Power, and today we're exploring how innovation and trade can create wealth beyond conquest. Let's go. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Blueprints of Power. I'm Jack.
I'm Lily.
And I'm Charlie.
Today we're covering the Dutch Empire, and this is a really different kind of empire from most we've covered.
How so?
Because the Dutch Empire was primarily commercial, not territorial. They weren't trying to conquer large land masses like the British or Spanish. They wanted trading posts, monopolies, and profit.
The Dutch were merchants first, conquerors second, and that approach made them incredibly wealthy during what's called the Dutch Golden Age, roughly from 1580 to 1670.
Why is it called the Golden Age?
Because during that period, the Netherlands was the wealthiest, most urbanized, and most culturally vibrant place in Europe. Amsterdam became the financial capital of the world. Dutch ships dominated global trade, and Dutch artists created masterpieces.
At their peak, the Dutch controlled trade routes and colonies from Manhattan, which they founded as New Amsterdam, to Indonesia, from South Africa to Brazil, from Sri Lanka to Taiwan.
Wait, the Dutch founded New York?
They did, in 1624. They called it New Amsterdam until the English took it in 1664 and renamed it New York.
So the Dutch had a global presence. But their empire looked different from others. They focused on port cities, trading posts, and islands, not massive land empires.
And they pioneered financial innovations that changed the world. The Amsterdam Stock Exchange, founded in 1602, is considered the first modern stock market. The Dutch East India Company was the first publicly traded company. Dutch banks developed sophisticated credit systems.
So they invented modern finance.
They pioneered it, yes. And for about 80 years, from the late 1500s to the mid-1600s, they were the dominant economic power in the world.
So today we're covering how the Dutch built their commercial empire, how they became so wealthy and innovative, and why they eventually declined and were surpassed by the British.
All right, I'm ready. This sounds fascinating. Lily, where did the Dutch come from?
Okay, so the Dutch are from the Low Countries, the Netherlands, and Belgium today, which are literally low-lying lands near the sea. Much of the country is below sea level.
So they're living in a swamp, basically.
Essentially, the Dutch spend centuries building dikes, draining marshes, and reclaiming land from the sea. There's a saying, God created the world, but the Dutch created the Netherlands.
So they're master engineers?
Out of necessity, yes. And in the 1500s, the Netherlands is part of the Spanish Empire, ruled by the Habsburg family who also control Spain.
So Spain owns the Netherlands?
Yes, through inheritance. But the Dutch are increasingly unhappy with Spanish rule, especially after King Philip II of Spain tries to suppress Protestantism in the Netherlands.
Religious conflict?
Major religious conflict. Many Dutch are Calvinist Protestants, but Spain is Catholic and tries to enforce Catholicism. Plus, Spanish taxes are heavy and Spanish troops behave brutally.
So the Dutch rebel.
In 1568, they start the 80 Years' War, the Dutch revolt against Spanish rule. It's led by William of Orange, a Dutch nobleman who becomes a national hero.
80 years? That's a long war.
Very long. And the war has a strange structure. The northern provinces, what becomes the Netherlands, break away from Spain and declare independence in 1581, forming the Dutch Republic.
So they're independent.
They declare independence, but Spain doesn't officially recognize it until 1648 with the Peace of Westphalia. So for decades, they're fighting while also building an independent state.
How do they fight Spain and build a country at the same time?
Innovation and commerce. The Dutch can't match Spain's military power on land, so they focus on sea power. They build ships, lots of ships, and they start trading everywhere Spain isn't or can't defend.
So they're stealing Spain's trade?
Competing aggressively? Yes, and they create the Flight, a revolutionary ship design. It's a cargo ship that's wider, flatter, and more efficient than traditional ships. It can carry more goods with fewer crew, reducing costs.
So they're innovating ship design?
Innovating everything. Dutch shipyards produce ships faster and cheaper than anyone else. By the early 1600s, the Dutch have the largest merchant fleet in the world.
What are they trading?
Initially, bulk goods, timber from Scandinavia, grain from the Baltic, salt from Portugal, wine from France. They're the middlemen of Europe, transporting goods between regions.
So they're making money from shipping, not producing.
Exactly. They're the carriers. But then they expand globally. And this brings us to the VOC, the Verenigde Oostindische Compagnie, the Dutch East India Company.
What's that?
Founded in 1602, the VOC is a chartered company given a monopoly by the Dutch government on trade in Asia. And it's unlike any company before.
How so?
The VOC can issue shares to investors, it can borrow money, it can wage war, sign treaties, establish colonies, and mint money. It's a state within a state.
Wait, a company can wage war?
The VOC has its own army and navy. At its peak, it has 30,000 employees and 200 ships. It's the most powerful corporation in history.
What does it trade?
Spices, nutmeg, cloves, mace, cinnamon, from Indonesia, which the Dutch call the East Indies. These spices are incredibly valuable in Europe, and the VOC establishes a monopoly by conquering the spice islands in modern-day Indonesia.
They conquer islands for spices.
They do, and they're ruthless. In the Banda Islands, when the local population resists Dutch control, the VOC massacres or enslaves almost the entire population and replaces them with Dutch colonists.
That's horrific.
It is. The Dutch Empire, like other European empires, involves exploitation, violence, and slavery. The VOC profits from the slave trade and uses enslaved labor in its colonies.
So there's a dark side to all this wealth.
Absolutely. The wealth of the Dutch Golden Age is built partly on exploitation and violence in the colonies.
What about other regions?
The Dutch established trading posts everywhere. In 1652, they found Cape Town in South Africa as a supply station. They colonized parts of Brazil briefly. They established trading posts in Japan. The only Europeans allowed to trade there for centuries. They found New Amsterdam in North America.
So they're everywhere?
They're the most global trading network in the world, and they're making enormous profits. The VOC pays dividends averaging 18% annually for almost 200 years. Investors get rich.
So this company is a money printing machine?
For a long time, yes, and all that wealth flows back to Amsterdam.
All right, quick break. If you're loving this story about how the Dutch basically invented modern capitalism, and honestly, this is blowing my mind, hit that follow button. Subscribe to Blueprints of Power wherever you're listening. We're covering empires that changed the world in all different ways. Military empires, trading empires, intellectual empires, all the different paths to power. Share this with someone who loves economics, business history, or just understanding how the modern world works. This is the origin story of capitalism, and please leave us a review. Every review helps new listeners discover the show. Tell us what you think, what you're learning, what topics you want us to explore. All right, back to the Dutch, because we're about to get into their golden age and how they revolutionized finance and culture. Let's go.
Okay, so the Dutch are trading globally and getting rich. How do they organize all this?
Let me break down the Dutch recipe for wealth and power. Ingredient number 1, financial innovation. The Dutch create the world's first modern financial system.
What does that mean?
In 1602, the VOC becomes the first company to issue shares to the public. Anyone can buy stock and become part owner. This creates the first stock market, the Amsterdam Stock Exchange.
So regular people can invest?
Yes. Before this, companies were usually partnerships among a few wealthy people. But the VOC sells shares to thousands of investors. This raises massive capital, about 6.5 million guilders at launch.
Is that a lot?
Enormous for the time, and it spreads risk. If the VOC loses a ship, no single investor is ruined. This innovation allows companies to take bigger risks and undertake larger projects.
So they invented crowdfunding?
Essentially, and they innovate further. The Amsterdam Stock Exchange allows people to trade shares with each other. Prices fluctuate based on supply and demand. It's the birth of modern stock trading.
Did people speculate and try to get rich?
Absolutely. There are booms and crashes. The most famous is tulip mania in the 1630s. Tulip bulbs become speculative assets, prices skyrocket absurdly, then crash. It's one of the first recorded economic bubbles.
People went crazy for tulips?
Tulips were exotic and fashionable. At the peak, a single rare tulip bulb could cost as much as a house. Then the bubble burst and prices collapsed.
That's insane.
It shows how sophisticated, and sometimes irrational, Dutch financial markets were. And ingredient 2, the Amsterdam Wissel Bank, founded in 1609. It's one of the first modern central banks.
What does a central bank do?
It standardizes currency, provides secure deposits, facilitates payments between merchants, and offers credit. Before this, there were hundreds of different coins circulating, making trade complicated. The Wissel Bank simplifies everything.
So it makes commerce easier?
Much easier. And it makes Amsterdam the financial capital of Europe. Merchants from everywhere bank in Amsterdam.
So the Dutch control the money?
They control much of European finance. And ingredient 3, religious tolerance. The Dutch Republic is relatively tolerant for its time.
How so?
While most of Europe persecutes religious minorities, the Netherlands allows different Christian denominations and even Jews to practice relatively freely. This attracts skilled immigrants, Jews fleeing Spain and Portugal, Huguenots fleeing France.
So talented people move there?
Yes, and they bring skills, banking, diamond cutting, printing, trade networks. Tolerance becomes an economic advantage.
So they're benefiting from diversity?
Absolutely. And ingredient 4, urbanization and culture. The Netherlands becomes the most urbanized place in Europe. Amsterdam grows from 30,000 people in 1570 to 200,000 by 1650.
That's massive growth.
Explosive growth. And wealth creates a middle class that demands art, books, and consumer goods. This fuels the Dutch golden age of painting.
Rembrandt and those guys?
Yes. Rembrandt, Vermeer, Frans Hals, Jan Steen, they're painting for a broad market, not just aristocrats. Middle-class Dutch people buy paintings to decorate their homes.
So art becomes commercialized?
It becomes a market commodity, and Dutch artists are incredibly skilled. The use of light, detail, realism. Vermeer's Girl with a Pearl Earring, Rembrandt's The Night Watch. These are masterpieces.
This is when they're making all that art?
During this 80-year golden age, Dutch artists produce thousands of paintings. It's an explosion of creativity funded by commercial wealth.
What else is happening culturally?
Science and philosophy. The Dutch are leaders in cartography, making the best maps in the world. They invent the microscope and telescope. René Descartes and Baruch Spinoza, influential philosophers, live and work in the Netherlands because of the intellectual freedom.
So it's not just money, it's culture and science too.
Money enables the culture and science. Wealthy people fund research, buy books, support artists. And ingredient 5, Republican governance.
The Netherlands is a republic?
Yes. Unlike most of Europe, which has kings, the Dutch Republic is ruled by elected representatives, the States General, and provincial assemblies. Wealthy merchants have political power.
So it's a merchant republic?
Exactly. It's not a democracy, only wealthy men vote, but it's more representative than monarchies. And merchants make policies that favor trade and commerce.
So the government serves business interests?
Very much so. And ingredient 6, naval power. To protect their trade, the Dutch build a powerful navy. They fight wars with Spain, England, and France to defend their commercial interests.
Do they win?
Sometimes. They fight 4 Anglo-Dutch wars with England between 1652 and 1784 over trade competition. They win some, lose some, but maintaining naval power is expensive.
So military costs are adding up?
Significantly. And that becomes part of the problem as we get into the decline.
What causes the decline?
Before we get into the decline of Dutch power, I want to note that the Dutch Golden Age shows how innovation, tolerance, and commerce can create wealth and culture. But it also shows that commercial empires built on exploitation have moral costs. The wealth came partly from colonial violence and slavery. If you're enjoying Blueprints of Power, please share this episode with anyone interested in economics, finance, or business history. Understanding how capitalism developed helps us think critically about how it works today. And please leave us a review. It helps the show grow and reach more people. All right, time to talk about how the Dutch lost their economic dominance to the British. Let's get into it.
Okay, so the Dutch are at their peak in the mid-1600s. What causes the decline?
The decline is gradual, caused by several factors. First, military competition becomes too expensive. The Dutch fight multiple wars against Spain, against England, against France.
They're fighting everybody?
They're fighting to protect their trade. But wars are costly, and the Netherlands is a small country. They can't match the military budgets of larger nations like France or England.
So they're getting outspent?
Yes. And second, England becomes a serious rival. In the late 1600s and 1700s, England copies Dutch innovations, stock markets, chartered companies, naval power, and combines them with a larger population and more resources.
So England's learning from the Dutch?
Learning and exceeding. The English East India Company competes with the Dutch VOC. The Royal Navy challenges Dutch naval dominance. And England has territorial colonies, North America, the Caribbean, that produce raw materials, while the Dutch mostly have trading posts.
So territorial colonies become an advantage.
They provide resources and markets that trading posts don't. And third, the decline of the VOC. By the 1700s, the VOC is struggling. Corruption increases, management becomes inefficient. Competition from English and French companies cuts into profits.
So the super company isn't so super anymore?
It's aging badly, and the VOC's monopoly approach creates resentment. Local populations in Indonesia rebel against Dutch exploitation. Maintaining control requires expensive military operations.
So colonial resistance increases costs?
Significantly. And fourth, France invades the Netherlands in 1672, the disaster year. The French army overruns most of the country. The Dutch survive by flooding their land, opening dikes and creating a water barrier, but it's devastating economically.
They flood their own country?
To stop the French, yes, it works, but the destruction is enormous. And from that point on, the Netherlands never fully recovers its dominance.
So they survive but are weakened?
Exactly. And fifth, the British simply become more powerful. Britain industrializes earlier and more completely than the Netherlands. British manufacturing, especially textiles, undercuts Dutch trade. The British Empire expands territorially, while the Dutch Empire stays mostly commercial.
So Britain wins by being bigger and more industrial?
Basically. And in the late 1700s and early 1800s, the Netherlands gets caught up in the Napoleonic Wars. France occupies the Netherlands from 1795 to 1813, and Dutch global power essentially ends.
So they get conquered by France?
Occupied by France? Yes. And when the Napoleonic Wars end, the Netherlands is reduced to a secondary power. They still have colonies, Indonesia, Suriname, some Caribbean islands, but they're no longer the dominant economic force.
What happens to the colonies?
The Dutch hold Indonesia until 1949, when Indonesia gains independence after a brutal war. They lose most other colonies in the 1900s. Today, the Netherlands is a prosperous country, but it's not an empire anymore.
What's the legacy?
Enormous. The Dutch pioneered modern capitalism. Stock markets, corporations, banking systems, these institutions spread globally and became the foundation of the modern economy.
So we're all living in a system the Dutch created?
They didn't invent it alone, but they pioneered many of its features. And Dutch art, architecture, and culture influenced the world. And philosophically, Dutch tolerance and republicanism influenced Enlightenment thinking about freedom and government.
So even though they lost their empire, their innovations lived on?
Exactly. The British Empire took over Dutch dominance, but it used Dutch methods. Stock companies, financial markets, naval trade. The system lived on.
All right, we've covered the rise, the golden age, and the decline of the Dutch Empire. Time for lessons. What can we learn from the nation that pioneered capitalism? Charlie, you're first.
Here's mine. Innovation can let a small player compete with giants. The Netherlands was tiny. 2 million people competing with Spain, France, and England, which had much larger populations. But through innovation, ship design, finance, trade networks, they created wealth far beyond their size. The lesson? You don't need to be the biggest to win. You need to be the smartest, most efficient, and most innovative. Whether it's businesses, teams, or countries, intelligence and innovation can overcome size.
Brains over brawn.
When used strategically, yes.
That's perfect. Mine's about the limits of commercial power. The Dutch built their empire on trade and finance, not territory or military conquest. That worked brilliantly for a century, but when military power mattered more, when France invaded, when England built a bigger navy, commercial power wasn't enough. The lesson? Different types of power matter in different contexts. Economic power is important, but it can't always substitute for military power, territorial control, or population size. You need multiple sources of strength.
Diversify your power sources.
Exactly.
Both excellent. Mine's about how tolerance can be a competitive advantage. The Dutch allowed religious minorities and immigrants when other countries persecuted them. Those people brought skills, networks, and innovation. The lesson? Exclusion is expensive and inclusion is profitable. When you welcome talent regardless of background, you get access to skills and ideas that closed societies miss. It's not just morally right, it's strategically smart.
Openness attracts talent.
Always.
That's really important, especially today.
The Dutch Golden Age is fascinating. They basically invented modern finance.
They did. The Amsterdam Stock Exchange in 1602 changed everything.
And it's wild that a country smaller than West Virginia was the richest place on earth.
Innovation matters more than size.
It really does. All right, that's it for today. Thanks for hanging with us on Blueprints of Power.
I'm Lily.
I'm Charlie.
And I'm Jack, and we'll see you next time. Peace out.